Special Education Services in the Time of COVID-19 by Brandy Venskis. So today we're going to talk about special education services within school or even without of the traditional brick and mortar school during this time and what that'll look like based upon services and also based upon how we would write it in an IEP. So first, there we go. We're going to talk about the education-based services. So if we're fully on-site services, one, you need to follow the school rules, which most schools include wearing a mask, social distancing, hand washing, having hand sanitizer available, cleaning up desks or areas after each kid. This also includes chairs. Don't have kids share the same the same pencils, pens, crayons, colored pencils, markers, dry erase boards, expo markers, anything. They all need to have their own supplies. Now, whether this is you having the supplies in your classroom and you build boxes for them, I have seen many providers having like the plastic shoe boxes for each of their students, which has all their supplies in it that are strictly theirs. It has their name on it. No one else touches them. No one else uses them. That is strictly theirs, and they're responsible for their own stuff. This can actually be a really helpful exercise for your middle school, high school, and even your younger kids to take responsibility for their stuff. Of course, we all have one or two of those students who there are kids that we love, but they lose things. So this could actually be a really great exercise for them that they have all their stuff right here and they're responsible for it. So like I said, so that goes into considering the practices in the classroom. So for example, aside from having maybe a shoebox with just their stuff in it, um, remember that you will have to sanitize the area when you are working, if you happen to be working one-on-one with them. Keep your groups to a minimum. A lot of us are used to having kids that are all on the same tier or same level, and so we usually have them sit around them. We teach them the same thing, even if they're on different grade levels, they're around us learning. Sometimes this doesn't work. Of course, if you have kids that are on or that you're trying to space out now. So you might want to look to see how you can space them to still keep them learning the same thing, or do what you can if, of course, we have pairs, which are few and far between now, especially with this going on. They're having to stay home more. So that our pool is shrinking on trying to find them, unfortunately. But just consider that, and especially when a class leaves, you have that bell time. Start having your students practice waiting or standing next to the desk or even grabbing a Clorox wipe to clean down the desk because they don't know who sat there before them. This is good practice in reg ed classrooms as well as special ed classrooms if you don't have the time to do it, which sometimes we just don't. It's unfortunate, but we have got to get this down. We've got to get things clean, sanitized. Also, keep in mind that you should be washing your hands. You have your kids washing your hands, especially if you're in a high function room. Those kids are in there a lot more often. So even as they get up and leave, they need to be washing their hands. They need to be using hand sanitizer. And even have them practice life skills of wiping things down. That's very good for everybody to have that down. Now, if we move into hybrid services, which is very possible, this is where part of it is, if your school even has that as an option, part of the time they are in school, and the other part of the time they are maybe every other day or even half days virtual. With this in mind, you need to remember that you are trying to give the same level of services as best to your ability. I know that seems impossible for some because you can't sit there and help the student, but you are with the students. They will have questions. Get them either all started one at a time, have them ask questions in the chats if you do it like that. Maybe you try scheduling them one-on-one for so many minutes and then see what they can do on their own. Start getting them that independence. It will probably not be pretty to start with because we all have those students, understandable, but we need to be looking at what does it look like, and maybe the harder stuff, the new stuff, is taught in person. And then when they go virtual, you do a review so that they can keep on building on those skills. Keep that in mind of how you can utilize that as well. If we go fully remote, these are the virtual services, completely online, you're on your computer. With that in mind, kids are already getting headaches. It's just happening. That's just the way it is. So try to remember that they are spending a lot of time. They are having to be on the computer about 7 hours a day, just straight on the computer. Even as adults, we get breaks from the computer. They are not getting breaks, or the breaks in between are very small. It is hard on them. This is hard on all of us. So keep that in mind, that if we have to go virtual, or some of you are already having to go virtual. Some parents have opted, if the school gives that an option, parents are choosing it. That's okay. So with the virtual services, we need to do our best to keep up, act like they are in the classroom with you, and that you are going to help them like you need to. Make sure you're answering their question. Make sure you're paying attention. I know that this is going to be taxing, but we need to make sure that we are keeping up services. And I understand that virtual makes it a little bit different from hybrid, but be considerate of maybe taking a day to do something and then the next day is review. A day to learn something, next day is review. Consider using smaller increments of time to go over a lesson with the kids so they can move on to something else that you can get to the next kid. Homeschooling is a little bit different. Usually this doesn't affect education-based services, so we will just send a ready, willing, and able letter to let them know that if they want to choose either of the 3 options, that is always possible. Virtual learning students, what you need to consider is that looking and rewriting the paperwork, because these will now be different, could potentially be different goals. If the student has just gone to completely virtual online learning. This is different than fully remote. Fully remote has them going to their classes. Virtual, totally different setup for here in Kansas. So in virtual, you'll have to relook at your goals, your minutes, everything, because these are students who may not need your help. They can go back, review the material, or they may work at a different pace that just requires you to look at what grade they're maintaining, make sure they're not missing assignments, and so on. So be considerate of what the student needs in all of these areas that you know how best to serve them. Okay, therapy-based services will be a lot of the same thing. Obviously following the school rules, consider what it looks like, make sure you're cleaning the area, having a student clean the area. Those life skills don't just have to be built in the classroom, build them in the therapy rooms. Speech, you might consider the clear plastic covering so that the kids can still see your mouth. Unfortunately, these things do fog up. They are not the greatest looking, but some students it might be a lot more helpful to be able to see your face. Of course, being virtual or having hybrid services or going fully remote might be a little bit easier because you don't have to wear that mask. So they can actually see your mouth moves. The problem is that, of course, if you have a video delay, this can be an issue. Now, with the hybrid services, you might try new things and working on new things, especially that they need to see your mouth in person with the cover. Whereas virtual, you might try giving them activities that strengthen what you're trying to teach them Find some short videos that have them repeat after someone that can hear. You can set up the short videos and they need to repeat after you. This is all possible. Virtual services, I would look at, I know a couple of speech, I keep on going back to speech because it's the one that I'm thinking of, but even OT-PT services have come to me and asked, hey, can we do one video session and then send home a packet of things for your kid to do by themselves? Do little check boxes next to say that they've done it. Yes, this is completely possible. It works, especially if you're considering the student. Some students will not be able to sit there for the minutes that you have written in there. When they're in person, they can do it because you're right there with them. They got this. But when it's virtual, that's totally different. They don't want to sit down in front of a computer. They want to run around like a crazy person. They're home. They're thinking sweet freedom. They will learn, but at first it will be rough. Homeschooling also, they can come to the school, or if they want to do completely homeschooling, we can send a ready, willing, able letter, or we can do virtual services for the students still. That's an option. Therapy is very different from educational services. Virtual students, you'll probably be a little bit more used to the virtual services. They might want to try to come in person. This, of course, depends upon your school. Keep in mind, schools have visitor regulations right now because of everything going on. So that's very different. So keep that in mind. What are your school rules? After that, you can look at if they're virtual, let them remain virtual. Do a 15-minute chat with them, call it a day. If they still want services, parents might not want services. That's okay too. We need to keep just that in mind. Next, so supplemental services, so these are your paras. Of course, your paras need to be following all the same rules. Basically, I know this is a repeat over and over again, you're hearing the same thing, but that is because everyone needs to know that just because we are on site really doesn't change anything. Whether we're hybrid, not going to change a whole lot. I know it looks different, it feels different, and we're like, this is different. Yes, it is. But our ability to give services to a student should not falter. I know a lot of you are looking at me like, how is that even possible? That's just not a thing. We can't provide the same level of care. I believe that if you work at it hard enough, it will not feel like you are, but it can be done, especially if you have parents. It will take everybody to do this. If you have parents, if you have paras, and you have all of you can work really hard to still provide the same services to a student and help them grow. I believe in you. I think we can do this. Okay, we have paperwork. So writing this into an IEP, PWN, or amendment. A lot of us will be writing PWN amendments right now because we do have to have, for the state of Kansas, we do have to have things on there like if we're on site, minutes don't really change, here are their minutes, this is what they're getting while they're in school. If we're hybrid, now it changes. Our minutes are not the same. We got to keep that in mind. Change them, especially if you need to know from your school. Are they coming 2 days on campus? Is it half days? What does it look like? This is information we have to have from each school. So ask the principals, counselors, anything. Also, then we need to have one for virtual. If we go completely virtual, consider your minutes. All of that will need to be put in a PWN, an amendment, and sent to parents. Also, talk to your parents. Don't just hand it to them. Explain to them that the state is making us do that because we have to consider what will it look like. We want to make sure, and tell the parents, we want to make sure that we're providing the same level of services to your student, the best of our abilities. They will understand and they will love that. Most parents that we have will be understanding. Unfortunately, you will have some that don't, but most parents will be understanding. Like I said, you need to consider the student. Can they sit there for that long? And like on here, consider level of services. Last thing I want to talk about is your health. Please take care of yourself. Do what I've asked you to, of cleaning things, sanitizing things, but also your mental health. Take care of yourself. Go out and relax on the weekends. It will be good. And the last thing I want to show you is different resources that you can use that I have used for this presentation. Thank you.